There comes a time when one soul feels compelled to retreat from another. This retreat is not always rejection, but often a search for breath, for clarity, for the restoration of inner balance. Distance is the language of the psyche when words have failed. It is an act of preservation, not punishment. Yet, when distance is misunderstood, the very possibility of reunion is threatened. What follows are 5 things you must never do if you truly wish for my return. They are not rules meant to bind you, but truths meant to set both of us free. When I take distance from you, it is not an invitation for you to chase me with trembling hands and desperate cries. Distance, though often feared, is a language of the soul. It arises when the inner world requires solitude, when the spirit seeks to hear its own whisper amidst the noise of constant demands. If you mistake this distance for abandonment and respond with frantic pursuit, you push me further away, not closer. What you must understand is that the psyche recoils at desperation. To feel hunted by another's anxiety does not create safety, it provokes escape. Imagine a bird that takes flight into the open sky to rest its wings and regain its strength. If you clamber after it shouting, demanding that it land in your hands, the bird cannot return. It only climbs higher, retreating into clouds beyond reach. This is the paradox of human connection. Closeness cannot be forced, for the very attempt to grasp too tightly destroys the possibility of intimacy. The more you cling, the less you are held. You may think your pursuit demonstrates love, but beneath it lies fear, and fear does not nourish love, it strangles it. Consider the countless stories of lovers or friends who, sensing distance, respond with ceaseless calls, questions, accusations, or urgent declarations of affection. Instead of drawing the other back, such actions deepen the chasm, for the one who withdraws does so to breathe, and every desperate intrusion makes the air thinner still. Psychology teaches us what ancient wisdom has always known. Anxious pursuit rarely restores harmony. Research on attachment behaviors reveals that when one partner anxiously chases, the other often retreats more strongly, like the tide receding from an approaching storm. This is not cruelty, but instinct. It is as though the unconscious whispers, "I must preserve myself. I must guard the fragile flame of my being from being smothered. Thus the more you push, the further I go." Think of the child who hides beneath the table during an argument at home. If the parent pulls the child forcefully into the light, demanding their return, the child does not feel loved. They feel exposed, violated in their need for sanctuary. But if the parent sits quietly nearby, allowing the child to emerge at their own pace, then safety is restored, and reunion becomes possible. In the same way, when I withdraw, it is not your frantic pursuit that brings me back, but your willingness to wait in stillness. It is tempting to see silence as a threat, as a void to be filled with your messages, your questions, your longing. Yet silence is not emptiness. Silence is the womb of renewal. It is in silence that desire rekindles. Imagine 2 flames burning too close together. Their heat may suffocate each other until one flickers out. But if you step back, allowing space, both flames burn brighter, each in its own sphere, each sustaining the other by not consuming it. Love, too, requires this rhythm of approach and retreat, closeness and distance, like the inhaling and exhaling of breath. If you try to hold only the inhale, you suffocate. If you try to avoid the exhale, you deny life itself. You may tell yourself that chasing proves devotion, yet devotion shown in desperation is not devotion. It is hunger, hunger for reassurance, hunger to silence your own fear of loss. True love is not hunger but nourishment. True devotion allows the other to be free, even if that freedom means enduring absence for a time. When you learn to trust that absence is not annihilation, but a natural ebb of the soul, then you are no longer ruled by fear. You begin to understand that distance can be fertile, that longing can give birth to deeper intimacy if it is not choked by pursuit. In many myths, the hero or the beloved must journey into the unknown, descending into forests or mountains, disappearing from those they love. Their absence is not a sign of betrayal, but a necessary step toward transformation. The waiting figure at home cannot drag them back prematurely. They can only hold faith, tending their own fire until the wanderer returns. And when they do, they return not as they left, but with treasures gathered from the depth, wisdom, strength, clarity. In the same way, when I distance myself, it may not be to leave you forever, but to return bearing something that absence has taught me. If you cannot allow me that passage, if you chase me into the shadows, you rob me of the very reason I left, to grow, to breathe, to hear the echo of my own soul. Let us speak plainly. To bombard another with constant questions, where are you? Why don't you answer? Don't you care about me? Is not a call of love, but a cry of fear. Imagine how it feels to be on the receiving end. The walls close in, the heart races, and instead of feeling longed for, one feels cornered, as though no air remains in the room. In contrast, consider the friend who quietly gives you space, who does not pry but waits with a steady presence. When you are ready, you return to them not with resentment, but with gratitude, for they respected your rhythm. Respect my absence. Let the silence breathe. In that breathing space lies the possibility of return. You may fear the silence, fearing it signals indifference or abandonment, but often it is precisely the silence that awakens longing. Absence creates perspective. It allows us to see what we could not when pressed too close. Like a painting viewed from a proper distance, love too requires space to reveal its true form. If you stand with your nose against the canvas, you see only fragments, colors without shape. Step back, and the whole picture emerges. So when I step away, do not chase. Sit with yourself instead. Confront the fear that rises in my absence. Ask yourself, why do I feel the need to run after what is retreating? What am I afraid to face within myself if I wait? In this way, my distance can become a mirror for your own soul, revealing wounds that were always there but hidden by the closeness. Perhaps it is not me you fear losing, but the part of yourself that believes you are unworthy of being loved unless you hold me in sight at all times. Such insights cannot emerge if you are consumed with pursuit. They require the patience of stillness, and when the time comes, if I choose to return, I do not return to the one who chased me into the clouds. I return to the one who held steady, who trusted that love is not maintained by desperation, but by dignity, not by clinging, but by allowing. Then reunion is not shadowed by resentment, but infused with a renewed strength. In that moment, both of us discover that distance was not an ending, but a hidden path leading us back to each other with clearer eyes and freer hearts. When I step away, it is not a declaration of enmity, nor is it a call for war. Distance is often an instinct of the soul, an attempt to preserve equilibrium when closeness has grown overwhelming. But too often, absence is misinterpreted as betrayal, and in that misinterpretation, the seeds of bitterness are sown. If you meet my absence with retaliation, if you greet my silence with sarcasm, my retreat with scorn, my withdrawal with the icy weapons of coldness and passive aggression, you do not protect love, you poison it. For what is built in vengeance is destined to collapse beneath its own weight. Distance is not a battlefield. It is a threshold, a pause in the music where both of us might hear what has been drowned out by noise. To transform that pause into punishment is to misunderstand its nature. Imagine a garden where the soil is tender and awaiting the rain. If, in frustration, you scatter salt upon it, because you resent the delay of the clouds, you destroy not only the possibility of this year's harvest, but the fertility of the land itself. So it is with love. When you turn my absence into a weapon, you poison the very ground upon which reconciliation could flourish. Think of two colleagues in conflict. One steps away from the heated conversation, needing time to gather clarity. The other interprets this withdrawal as an insult, as cowardice, and so begins to whisper resentment throughout the office. By the time the first returns, the air is thick with hostility, and the simple misunderstanding has grown into a chasm of mistrust. What might have been resolved with patience is now fractured beyond repair. Such is the power of punishment when we mistake distance for disloyalty. And yet, how human it is to feel that sting. The mind, left without the balm of immediate reassurance, fills the silence with shadows. Why did they leave? What are they hiding? What does this absence mean? The ego, unwilling to rest in uncertainty, rushes to build defenses. It constructs walls of coldness, barbed with sarcasm, fortified with passive aggression. But these walls, though they may protect the ego, also imprison the heart. When I return, I should not find that a fortress has been raised against me. I should not find the gates barred, guarded by bitterness. I should find that the door remains open, even if quietly, even if humbly, for only then can reunion be possible. The psyche cannot thrive in a constant atmosphere of retaliation. Punishment corrodes the bond between two people because it shifts the relationship from trust to control. If you use my absence to test me, to wound me, or to make me suffer as you suffer, then you teach me not to return. I learn that my step away will be met not with patience but with war. And so, instinctively, I choose to wander further, for what creature returns willingly to a trap? There is a story told in many forms across cultures, the tale of the prodigal one who leaves, not forever, but for a time. In every version, the possibility of return hinges on what awaits at home. If the wanderer finds open arms, reconciliation is born, and both are transformed. But if the wanderer finds scorn, punishment, or rejection, then the return does not happen at all. The home itself becomes hostile ground. Such stories reflect a truth buried deep within the collective soul. The one who distances themselves needs the assurance that they can come back without finding a battlefield. It is tempting to think that punishment will teach me a lesson, that if you make me feel the sharpness of your coldness, I will think twice before stepping away again. But punishment never breeds closeness. It breeds fear, resentment, and a secret wish for escape. If love is to endure, it must be stronger than the desire to retaliate. It must be wide enough to hold absence without collapsing into hostility. You may recall times when you, too, needed space, moments when the noise of relationship felt overwhelming, and you longed for quiet. Would you have returned more eagerly if your absence had been treated as treason? Would you have rushed back joyfully to someone who made you pay for every breath of distance you took? Or would you have hesitated, weighed down by the knowledge that your need for solitude had been turned into a crime? What you desire in your moments of retreat, offer me now, the grace to be absent without fear of retribution. Consider how many connections have been destroyed not by great betrayals, but by the small, repeated poisons of punishment. The partner who withholds affection because of hurt pride, the friend who answers kindness with cold silence because they felt ignored, the family member who meets absence not with understanding but with sarcasm. Each act may seem small, justified even, but together they corrode trust until nothing remains but ruins. And yet the alternative is so simple, to allow absence to be what it is, a pause, not a declaration of war. It requires courage to hold space without retaliation. It requires faith to keep the door unbarred when fear whispers that it should be locked. But this is the true test of love, not how tightly you can hold another when they are near, but how open you remain when they are far. To love is to risk, and to risk is to allow the possibility of absence without demanding punishment in return. When I return, what I seek is not a ledger of offences recorded in my absence. I do not wish to find that my leaving has been weaponized against me, that every day apart has been tallied as a debt I must repay. I seek instead the quiet strength of one who could endure the waiting without bitterness, who could carry the silence without turning it into a spear. To return to such a presence is to feel not judged but welcomed, not condemned but accepted, and in that acceptance healing becomes possible. Distance is not a sentence handed down in anger. It is a trial of patience, a refining of trust. If you can bear it without turning it into punishment, then absence becomes the crucible in which love is purified. But if you answer it with vengeance, then absence becomes the beginning of the end. For love cannot grow in soil poisoned by hostility. Only where the ground is kept open, soft, and patient can new roots take hold. So when I step away, resist the impulse to strike back. Resist the temptation to build walls higher, to salt the earth of reconciliation with bitterness. Understand instead that distance is not rejection but rhythm. It is the ebb that allows the tide to flow again. If you honor that rhythm, if you hold space with dignity rather than retaliation, then my return will not be shadowed by fear. It will be a true return, a coming home to something that has not hardened against me, but has waited with quiet faith. If my absence provokes you to replace me, to parade others before my eyes as if to prove your desirability, then you do not understand why I stepped away. My retreat was never meant to be a contest of worth. I did not withdraw to see whether you could outpace loneliness, or to measure myself against the shadow of another who might take my place. To attempt to show me how easily I can be replaced is to misunderstand the language of absence. Such gestures are not demonstrations of strength, but of fear disguised as defiance. They wound more deeply than silence, and they leave scars that no reconciliation can fully heal. When a bond exists between two souls, it is not sustained by comparison, but by presence. To use another person as a weapon against me, to prove a point rather than to nurture genuine connection, desecrates not only our bond but the dignity of the one you draw into your play, for they too become an instrument, not a beloved. What begins as an act of retaliation against me soon becomes a betrayal of yourself, for you reduce your own worth to a performance staged for my eyes. Imagine a couple in conflict, voices raised and emotions frayed. One storms out, needing solitude to soften the sharpness of anger. The other, in a wave of wounded pride, seeks immediate comfort in someone else's arms. When the storm clears and reconciliation seems possible, the embrace that follows is haunted. The scar of betrayal lingers like a shadow cast across the bed. Even if words of forgiveness are spoken, something invisible has shifted. The trust that once seemed natural now trembles under the weight of suspicion. A ghost enters every future embrace, whispering questions that cannot be silenced. Was I not enough? Will it happen again? Did my absence truly mean so little? Such ghosts rarely depart once invited. They haunt not only the one who was betrayed, but also the betrayer. who must now live with the knowledge that their reaction to absence destroyed what patience could have preserved. Do not mistake the urge to prove your worth for true resilience. To replace me hastily, to flaunt new companionship, is not strength but avoidance. It is easier to reach for another's arms than to confront the loneliness my absence awakens in you. But avoidance delays growth. What could have been a moment of reflection becomes instead an escape into distraction. And distraction cannot heal the soul. It only postpones the reckoning that must come. When silence asks you to turn inward, when solitude invites you to deepen your roots, the choice to rush outward in defiance robs you of that opportunity. The human heart, like the psyche, needs loyalty not only in presence but also in absence. Fidelity is not measured by how you act when all is harmonious, but by how you remain steadfast when you are tested by distance. The archetype of the faithful partner, present across myth and story, is not a figure who never experiences longing for another. It is one who resists the temptation to fill the void with substitutes. Penelope in Homer's tale did not parade suitors before Odysseus to prove her desirability. Her strength lay in her quiet endurance, her refusal to betray what she carried within. This is not weakness, nor is it passivity. It is the deepest form of inner power. For to remain true when absence tempts you to wander requires a discipline that outshines the shallow triumph of moving on too quickly. What I need to know in my absence is not how effortlessly you can replace me, but how deeply you can remain true even when silence stretches long. Do you have the courage to face yourself in the empty hours? Can you endure the ache of solitude without rushing to cover it with another's presence? These are the questions that absence asks, and their answers cannot be proven by the parade of new faces, but only by the strength you reveal in staying present with yourself. When you use another to provoke me, you create a triangle of suffering. I feel betrayed, you feel hollow, and the one drawn into the performance becomes an unwitting victim. Nothing authentic can be built on such ground. To stand in your own worth requires no audience. To weaponize your desirability reveals that you do not yet know your value, that you depend upon my jealousy to affirm it. True worth is silent, needing no display. It is like a mountain standing immovable, whether admired or ignored. To stand in your own dignity while I am away is to embody that mountain, unshaken by storms, secure in itself. Consider how fragile reconciliation becomes when absence has been filled by the presence of another. Even if you insist that it meant nothing, even if you say it was only a distraction, the image remains. The mind replays it endlessly, the heart wrestles with doubt, and trust becomes a thread stretched thin. Where there could have been renewal, there now grows suspicion. Where there could have been longing that deepened love, there now lingers fear that absence will always be punished with betrayal. It is not only romantic bonds that suffer this pattern. In friendships, too, when one person feels slighted and seeks a new companion out of spite, the original bond is wounded. The friend who left may return, but the trust is cracked. The one who sought to prove their worth finds that they have only diminished themselves, for true worth does not need proof. And in families, when estrangement arises and one sibling uses another relationship to provoke jealousy or punishment, the wound spreads wider than the original conflict. Everywhere the pattern repeats, leaving behind ghosts that could have been avoided by patience and silence. To resist the urge to replace is to cultivate the rarest of virtues, faith. Faith not that I will surely return, but faith that even in my absence your own value does not diminish. Faith that the emptiness can be endured, that longing itself can be transformed into strength. To remain loyal in silence is not to wait helplessly. It is to grow quietly, to deepen your own being so that if I do return, I meet not the same person I left, but one who has become more whole. This is the gift of waiting, and it cannot be given if you rush to fill the void with another's presence. So if you wish for my return, do not seek to prove your worth through replacement. Do not weaponize your desirability as though love were a contest to be won. Hold instead the deeper strength, the strength of fidelity, of dignity, of silence that speaks louder than any parade of substitutes. In that silence, I can sense your depth. In that steadiness, I can trust that my absence was not a prelude to betrayal, but a passage towards something greater. And it is only towards such strength that I can return, unafraid of ghosts, ready to meet you again with open hands rather than wounded ones. When distance arises, it awakens the most primal fears within us. In the silence of another's absence, the questions creep in like shadows across the mind. Am I not enough? Am I unlovable? Have I already been forgotten? These whispers of the unconscious echo through the chambers of the heart, magnifying every past wound, every hidden insecurity. In those moments of uncertainty, the temptation is strong to give in to despair, to collapse into the arms of self-pity. Yet to do so is to build a prison not only for yourself, but also for me. For when your sorrow becomes a performance, when every word you speak carries the weight of your desperation, you place upon me a burden that no one can bear. Self-pity is like quicksand. The more you thrash within it, the deeper you sink. And when you attempt to drag me into that pit with you, through cries of helplessness, through pleas that bind rather than liberate, you ensure that both of us suffocate together. Imagine a friend who distances themselves to gather their thoughts, only to be met with endless messages filled with declarations such as, "I cannot live without you. You are destroying me by staying away. Don't you see what you're doing to me?" These words may be meant as confessions of love, but in truth they are chains. They do not invite me back. They ensnare me, making my absence a crime, my silence a weapon in your eyes. No soul longs to return to a place where love has been twisted into a burden. When you drown in self-pity, what you ask of me is impossible. You are not asking me to return because of love. You are asking me to return to rescue you from yourself. But no one can rescue another from the abyss of their own despair. That journey, as difficult as it is, belongs to the one who suffers. If I attempt to lift you out while you are still clinging to your own chains, both of us are dragged down. This is why relationships often fracture when one partner succumbs to endless despair. The other begins to feel not like a companion but like a savior, conscripted into a role they never chose. And eventually even the strongest will recoil from a love that demands salvation rather than partnership. Consider how heavy it feels to stand beside someone who has collapsed into hopelessness. Their presence becomes a mirror reflecting only your failures. You did not reassure enough, you did not respond quickly enough, you did not stay close enough. No matter what you give, it is never sufficient, for their despair is bottomless. 1,000 reassurances cannot fill the void that they refuse to fill themselves. It is like pouring water into a vessel with no bottom. The more you pour, the more is lost, and slowly you begin to pull back, not out of cruelty but out of exhaustion. This is the tragedy of self-pity. The very cry for closeness drives away the one it longs to hold. If you wish me to return, show me not your despair, but your dignity. Show me that even when shaken by absence, you can hold your own soul with steady hands. This does not mean you must be unfeeling, or that you must deny the pain of distance. On the contrary, to admit your pain with honesty is human. but there is a difference between confessing your wound and drowning in it. There is a difference between saying, "I miss you deeply, but I will be okay until you return," and saying, "Without you, I am nothing." The first is an expression of love rooted in strength. The second is a demand born of fear. The first invites me back into connection. The second makes me responsible for keeping you alive. Strength, even when trembling, is far more inviting than despair. It is not perfection that calls me back, but the sight of your resilience. When I sense that you can carry yourself, even in absence, I feel safe to return, for I know that I am wanted, not needed as a crutch. Love should never be born from the fear of collapse, but from the freedom of choice. If you make me your sole source of stability, then I am no longer your beloved. I am your lifeline, and lifelines are not embraced with passion, but clutched with desperation. The unconscious teaches us through symbols. Self-pity is the archetype of the drowning figure, arms thrashing in dark waters, screaming for rescue. Yet the paradox is this: the more another tries to save them, the more they pull their rescuer under. The way out is not found in the Saviour's arms, but in the discovery of inner strength, the moment when the drowning one realizes that their own feet can touch the ground beneath the water. Until that realization comes, no rescue is lasting. In the same way, when you collapse into despair, my return cannot heal you. At best, it delays your reckoning with yourself. Think of the people you admire, not because they never suffered, but because they suffered with dignity. A friend who endured heartbreak yet held themselves upright, who admitted their pain but did not demand that the world revolve around it. A parent who endured absence with quiet strength, who kept the household steady until the missing one returned. A colleague who faced rejection but transformed it into growth rather than endless complaint. Such figures inspire loyalty because they embody resilience, because they show that suffering need not lead to collapse. This is the invitation absence offers you, to discover your own depth, to prove to yourself that you can endure the silence without becoming undone, to resist drowning in self. Pity is to trust that you are more than the sum of another's presence. It is to face the silence with courage, and to hear within it not abandonment, but the call to stand on your own ground. When you can hold yourself with dignity, my return becomes an act of love, not an act of rescue. And when I embrace you again, it is not with the weariness of one who carries another's despair, but with the joy of two souls meeting freely, each whole in themselves. That kind of reunion is not burdened by chains, but lit with the fire of true connection. So let your longing be real, let your vulnerability be seen, but do not collapse into the abyss of self-pity. Trust that even in absence you are enough. Trust that your own soul can sustain you. In that strength you create a space to which I can return willingly, not as your savior but as your equal. And in that space love can be reborn, stronger than it was before, because it is no longer rooted in fear, but in the dignity of two souls who can stand alone and yet choose freely to stand together. The greatest mistake you can make in my absence is to treat the distance as wasted time. So often, when two souls drift apart, one waits in bitterness, counting each day as though it were stolen from them, as though the pause in closeness were nothing more than an empty void. But absence is never empty. Absence is a field waiting to be cultivated. If, when I return, I find you unchanged, still bound by the same grievances, still repeating the same old patterns, still circling the same unresolved fears, then my retreat has been in vain. For what purpose does distance serve if not to grant us both the possibility of transformation? Distance offers you the same gift it offers me, the opportunity to evolve. The pause between us is not a punishment but a mirror, showing you parts of yourself you may not see when you are caught in the constant reflection of my presence. In my silence, you encounter your own voice. In my absence, you confront your own shadows. And in that confrontation lies the possibility of growth. To squander it is to allow absence to harden into stagnation rather than ripen into renewal. Think of how nature teaches this truth again and again. Winter strips the earth bare, leaving fields silent and trees barren. To the impatient it seems like wasted time, as though life has abandoned the soil. But beneath the frozen ground roots deepen, seeds rest, and the earth prepares itself for spring. When the thaw arrives, the world does not return unchanged. It bursts forth in blossoms that could not have existed without the discipline of winter. Absence between two people is much the same. It is a season that demands trust, that though no leaves appear to flourish, something vital is happening beneath the surface. But if you spend that winter only lamenting the cold, refusing to plant, refusing to tend your inner soil, then when spring comes, nothing new will bloom. There are countless real stories of partners who separate briefly, not in rejection, but in recognition that something must change. One uses the time to heal their inner wounds, perhaps confronting long ignored trauma, seeking therapy, or nurturing neglected passions. The other rediscovers forgotten parts of themselves. The joy of creativity, the strength of solitude, the call of friendships that had been abandoned. When they return, they do not meet as the same people who parted. They meet as two renewed souls, carrying new strength, new insight, and a deeper understanding of themselves. And because they have grown, they can now connect at a depth that was impossible before. Their reunion is not a return to the old, but a step into the new. Contrast this with the story of those who waste the time. One waits in bitterness, clinging to resentment like a shield, replaying every grievance in their mind, as though rehearsing an argument that never ends. Another numbs themselves with distraction, refusing to face their inner emptiness, allowing the days to slip by untouched by reflection. When they come back together, what greets them is not renewal but repetition. The same quarrels erupt, the same wounds bleed, the same cycles repeat, and soon separation comes again, this time not as a pause for growth, but as a permanent fracture. For absence without growth is not a passage but a slow decay. When I leave, I do not want to find you waiting exactly where I left you, standing frozen in time. I want to return and see that you have moved, not away from me, but deeper into yourself. Show me that you have listened to the silence and let it teach you something. Show me that my absence has fertilized your soil, not left it barren. Growth is the most powerful invitation to return, because it signals that the relationship is alive, that it has the capacity to expand and become more than it was. If you remain unchanged, then absence has served no purpose, and my return feels like stepping back into a stagnant pond rather than into a flowing river. Growth does not mean perfection. It does not mean that when I return you must present yourself as flawless, with every wound healed and every shadow conquered. Growth means movement. It means that you have taken the time to look inward, to face what needed facing, to begin the work that only solitude can demand of you. Perhaps you have confronted your fear of abandonment, recognizing how it whispers in the silence. Perhaps you have discovered strength you did not know you had, learning to hold yourself without leaning entirely on another. Perhaps you have found a spark of creativity or rediscovered a passion long forgotten, and in doing so remembered that your soul has depths independent of mine. All of this is growth. All of this transforms absence from wasted time into sacred time. In the deepest layers of the psyche, absence is never only about the other person. It is also about what their absence awakens within you. The archetype of separation is ancient, woven into countless myths. The hero departs, the beloved disappears, the divine withdraws. In these stories, the one left behind faces a choice, to wither in despair, or to use the absence as a forge for their own transformation. Those who grow during absence are the ones who, when reunion comes, meet not as who they were, but as who they have become. And the reunion then becomes a union of two stronger selves, not a repetition of the fragile bond that once broke under strain. If you forget to grow in my absence, you dishonor the very rhythm of life, for life itself is a pattern of nearness and distance, fullness and emptiness, birth and death, day and night. To resist that rhythm is to cling to illusion. To embrace it is to recognize that every absence carries within it a hidden seed, waiting to sprout into something new. But only if you tend it, only if you allow yourself to be changed by the silence. So when I am away, do not sit in bitterness. Do not waste your days rehearsing old wounds or waiting passively for me to return and rescue you from yourself. Use the time, grow, read, learn, create, reflect, heal, breathe. Allow the absence to strip away what is no longer needed, the way winter strips the trees. Allow it to deepen your roots so that when I return, I meet a stronger, more grounded, more luminous version of you. That is how absence becomes a gift rather than a curse. When reunion comes after such growth, it is like spring breaking open after a long winter. The air is charged with renewal, the ground fertile with possibility. What once felt fragile now feels strong because it has been tested and transformed. And in that moment love itself is reborn, not as a repetition of what once was, but as the creation of what can now be. This is the true purpose of distance, the hidden meaning behind separation. It is not to punish, not to weaken, not to destroy, but to prepare us for the possibility of becoming more, if only we have the courage to grow while the silence lasts. When distance enters between two souls, it is not an end, but a passage. To chase with desperation, to punish, to replace, to drown in pity, or to remain stagnant. These are the ways we close the door forever. If you truly desire my return, let the silence breathe, hold the space with dignity, and use the time to become more whole. Only then does reunion become not a repetition of what was, but the birth of what could be.